Welcome to the New World Normal podcast. I'm Debbie Harrell, your host, and twice a month I'm speaking with some amazing humans who are disrupting norms and working to create a more inclusive and holistic society. These people are using their sphere of influence, no matter how large or small, to positively impact the world around them. They'll be sharing their expertise as well as sharing stories of resiliency and hope. We'll be talking about the issues that are affecting us all, from the environment, human rights, social issues, criminal justice, and education. We'll talk about our healthcare systems, wellness, and food, from how it's cultivated and distributed to how it's prepared and consumed. Basically, we're going to talk about all the systems in our society that aren't necessarily working for the benefit of the many. We'll strategize and collaborate on how we as a collective can intentionally make better choices every day that will lead to a positive change in the world around us. Because in the end, it's up to us to solve these problems. There is no magic potion or magic wand. It is us and our daily choices and how we spend our time and how we invest our resources. Intrigued? Stick around and have a listen, and by all means, click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast source. Hello, and welcome back to New World Normal. Today, we're talking to Sunniva Sorby, who is a polar ambassador, author, and explorer who made history in 1993 as a member of the first women team to ski to the South Pole, and in 2021 as a member of the first women team to overwinter solo in the Arctic. With over 25 years of experience in the polar regions as a historian and a naturalist guide, she's an advocate for protecting the polar regions through storytelling, citizen science, youth engagement, and visual inspiration. An accomplished keynote speaker, she presented at the United Nations COP26 on the importance of polar education to understand climate change. Sunniva's goal is to inspire better service to the Earth and to each other through her project, Hearts and Ice. And personal connection, Sunniva is actually a member of my bonus extended family and the sweetest and coolest auntie to my kids. And it's just a pleasure for me to get to talk to her about her amazing experiences and her messages for us all on the environment. And I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hello, Sunniva. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited to hear more about your story, your experience in the Arctic, and your message for us about the environment on a whole. I was actually listening to my favorite news podcast this morning, and they were talking about a report that was just given at the UN that we have less than 5 years to decrease our greenhouse emissions by like 50%. That's a pretty dire message.
It's a pretty dire message. And Debbie, thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure for me to be chatting with you right now. Thank you. So that is a dire message. I actually spoke at the United Nations at COP26 in Glasgow, and on the importance of polar education to understand climate change. And so what's happening is that we're seeing changes all over the planet, aren't we, with all the extremes? But that report comes on the heels of that big meeting in October. And we just need to keep banging the drum. Our news media focuses on all the sensationalist stuff out there. We don't really focus too much on climate change. That's something that I feel is missing from the conversation that should be part of school education. We should have a curriculum that educates, our youth in middle school, high school, and up to understand that their active participation in global issues really matters. And so this report points to the reason it's such a dire message is it involves a sort of a collective consciousness and awakening that is really not present in our world today. It involves us thinking as a whole unit instead of the singular approach, which is very capitalistic and very, protecting one's resources as opposed to taking care of all of us.
That working together, collaborative.
That's right.
That we don't really, and I feel like the news kind of avoids it because it is overwhelming and it feels so big. But I love your message of personal responsibility. Like we all play a part in this. And if we can all come together and work towards that common goal. And also I feel like there was a time not too long ago where science was even kind of contradicting itself and wasn't quite sure, are we really contributing to this, or could it be something else? I think they were probably being funded by people that wanted them to say other things. But now more and more, you're getting such a solid consensus from across the board.
That's right. It's the war of the swarm. I mean, all of the great social movements have happened because people have bound together around something or opposing something or joining towards a force for something good. And that is what we're seeing. We saw that started with Greta Thunberg with her Fridays for Future. Everybody can relate to that. Her standing in front of the school, striking on Friday. And it's interesting. I saw a post. I can't remember who the U.S. anchor was, but he had a picture of Greta Thunberg up there, and asked people to guess how many social media followers she had. And then he had a photo of Kim Kardashian on top of her truck or something with high heels and all her bling bling. And then the question was, guess how many social media followers she has? And it doesn't take, rocket science here to figure out who had the most social media followers. So it tells us a little bit about the social dynamics out there, and what people are focused on. And it's not so much even our Western culture. It's all over the world. We have access to all sorts of things that help to insulate us from all the disasters that are happening out there, don't we?
It's a little bit of that privilege where we are protected from it. So it's like, oh,
not in my backyard.
Too bad for those people, but really it's going to come for us all eventually. So
it is. I was on the phone 2 days ago with, I used to live in Squamish and now I'm living on Vancouver Island. And I'm very close with the mayor of Squamish. And she was telling me that BC has seen the most extremes in the 2 years of any time in, the history of people living on the west coast of Canada. We've had extreme floods, mudslides that people in California are very familiar with. We've had enormous forest fires. That has taken out an entire town called Lytton. And so it's all hands on deck, as it relates to climate change and mitigating all these natural disasters that are only escalating. And it's in my backyard. Who would have thought 10 years ago that we would ever experience these types of things on a frequent basis that we are? It's crazy.
It's crazy. And it does feel a little overwhelming at times. But let's take it a step back, because I feel like we maybe jumped a little bit too into it, because I want to hear about your story, like how you came to be the polar ambassador that you are and what brought you to being the advocate that you are for the environment. Tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Okay, that's a loaded question too, eh? So I'll just share a tiny little story of me being invited to speak at my high school on career day. And I was looking at all the women. It was a girls' school in Montreal called Trafalgar School for Girls. And I was looking at all the women that were going to participate in the day, and I was looking at their bios, and I'm like, oh my God, look at all these people. I have nothing in common with any of them because they've all had very linear careers. And I've had the fortunate opportunity, coming from two parents that were born and raised in Norway and immigrated to Canada, that have had, all sorts of different interests, and they didn't clip my wings. And so the outdoors has always been something really near and dear to me, where I feel my strength. I don't need to read Shape magazine, or I don't need to look at a TV commercial to either make me feel either uninspired or empowered, if you know what I mean. It's an inside job. And I've learned early on to develop a skill set that was one where I felt a certain degree of self-confidence. And I kept pushing that envelope, that saying, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And so I kept peeling back the layers to try to understand, why I'm here. It's a big question we all ask, although we don't admit. And, what's my purpose? What kind of thing can I actually make a deposit towards in my life, before I end up making the grand exit, which we all will do. And fast forward, I was 30 years old and managing an outdoor store and teaching climbing and backpacking and map and compass classes before GPS were invented. And that dates me right there, doesn't it?
Right. That's really cool to have that skill, though. It's like, wow.
Absolutely. Because if the GPS fails, I can read a map.
I want you on my zombie apocalypse team.
Okay. Whatever that is, I'm there. I know what that is. So, and then I was invited to join the first team of women that skied to the South Pole. And, I was in the minor leagues when I got that invitation, because I put myself out there to ask them if they needed support. I heard from my roommate at the time that this team of women were going to try to ski all the way across the Antarctic continent. And I'm like, what? Why? You know,
Why?
why? I mean, isn't that why? Everybody asks the why. Everybody asks me why. And when I understood a little bit more about the objectives, they did want to make history as the first team of women to reach the South Pole. They wanted to educate youth around the world on the importance of the Antarctic. And, you know, there's so many different subjects revolve around looking at Antarctica, history, climate change, social studies, math, science. So there were curriculum materials developed around our expedition while we were en route. Pre-internet, okay? This is 1992, 93. So education was a huge part of it. Going as friends and coming back as friends was one of our goals. And then we also wanted to conduct psychological and physiological research on us as subjects for a NASA study. And the woman who was conducting that was putting together criteria for astronauts in space. And she thought there would be a huge correlation between us as risk takers. She perceived us as risk takers and potential astronauts. You know, how do we perceive risk and how do we measure that? And I just wanted to support what they were doing. So I sent a fax. Can you believe that? To Anne Bancroft. And I just said, Anne, I'm running an outdoor store. I have connections in the outdoor industry. If there's anything I can do to support what you women are doing, sign me up. And it turns out they were missing a team member. So anyway, fast forward, I flew to Minnesota, was interviewed, grilled, deep dive into who are you not, what skills do you have, what skills do you not possess. It was the first time I had to do this really deep inventory into who I was as a 30-year-old, right? With full disclosure. And so I joined the team. I had 4 months to prepare. And that was sort of my little trajectory away from weekend adventures and week-long adventures to an expedition world, which is a world where, you know, it's an environment that forces something called expedition behavior, which is what we wrote a blog about through Hearts on the Ice, the current project I'm involved in with Hilde Fallenström. It's this collective thinking that you're on these trips and you have to be self-sufficient, but you have to also be willing to, you know, look out for the safety of the entire whole and think as a whole and have all your actions be respectful and kind and with the end goal in mind. And I've had lots of different careers after that, corporate careers. I've started my own company, but my life has always revolved in some way with a thread, a heart thread, if you will, to Antarctica initially. And then I started going up to the Arctic in 2015. That was my first trip working as a naturalist historian on expedition cruise ships. And then fast forward, you know, here I am 3 years deep into Hearts in the Ice, a project that I co-created with my expedition partner, Hilde.
We'll talk a little bit more about Hearts in the Ice in a second, but I wanted to revisit what you said about expedition behavior. And that really sounds like something we should all be like, not just when we're on expedition, but right now it kind of feels like with all the fast changing things happening in our current cultures and around the world, like it would be important for us all to work together and think about the end result. And also I was thinking about the importance of that interview when you went to Minnesota. Is that where you said it was? Minnesota?
Minnesota. Yeah.
That how important that interview must have been for the expedition to determine who you were, not just physically, like are you physically able, but mentally, how you were going to fit in with the group and how you were going to deal with, I'm sure, all the stuff that comes up when you're on that type of expedition. Like I've done some challenging things in my life, like different races and stuff where you do the relays and it's overnight and it's challenging, but I cannot imagine an expedition to the South Pole.
You touch on something really important, Debbie, and that is the psychological, the stuff that you can't see. You know, we are a society where we are so judgmental as people. I have to admit, I have initial things that fire, you know, when you see something or you see someone, can they not squeeze the bicep, not big enough, which happened to Anne Bancroft in the boardroom when she was looking for funding. But that 3 days in Minnesota was really illuminating for me because we often attribute all these grand expeditions and summits to the top of things and Pacific Crest trails and John Muir trails as sheer physical feats. they are physical for sure. But the thing that we often don't talk about, unless it's in a small like circle of friends, is the whole mental stuff that goes on, the stuff that we can't see. And I think the reason they chose me, because I was clearly green. I did not have the skill set. They had just come back from a training trip across Greenland. And I'd never skied across Greenland. The longest ski trip I did was with 3 other people when I skied across the High Sierra range which was like everything was over 11,000 feet. It was a 10-day trip. That was the longest trip I'd been on. I had never been completely untethered from family, friends, without communication. I had never, had this feeling of complete, utter sort of having to focus on my own mental, how shall I say, fitness.
It's better. I call it the proverbial shit. So yours is probably a little more.
Okay. Well, that works too. It was all the stuff, all the demons that live in there and all the crap we have going on, the voices in our head. I think what they really appreciated with me was I was fit. I was fit enough to join the team. I was also quite naive. I was, I understood myself well enough to know that I wouldn't quit. And that's kind of a Norwegian trait. And it both served me well, and it also came back to bite me in the ass. So, there's that. And they also knew that I had a great sense of humor and I had a spirit. I was just like, if I'm part of the team, I'm going to give myself a 2-week trial period on the expedition, and then I'm all in. So that was all mental. That was something that I didn't announce to the other 3 team members. So it was really interesting. The selection process there's no cookie cutter way to pick the right person for, like a Trans-Catalina trail trip or a PCT trail trip, or it's synergy. It's, you either fit with these people and you want to wake up with them and you want to go to sleep with them and you want to be able to have patience and kindness and be able to air your dirty laundry on a day when you need to, right?
Yeah. All while keeping that end goal in mind and working towards that. Very impressive. I think so.
Thank you. It was a huge learning experience for me, just trying to be too proud or stoic. And your ego is something that's a very interesting element that takes us to the door of all these experiences. And then you have to learn over time. And it took me some years, and it definitely happened on the South Pole expedition, where your ego can't take you across anything. You need to check that at the door. You need to be willing to surrender, literally give up your sense of who you think you are, who you think you want to be, and just be in the moment with your breath and your step, and be willing to explore the fact that you just might be changing a little bit and evolving. And that's kind of cool.
Yes. I love all of that. And how you talked about at the beginning, the outdoors being so big to you and how it was an inside job. And I feel like it sounds like it was part of your healing of you as a human, just being in the indoors and challenging yourself and working through all that stuff that comes up in those times.
Absolutely. It's a funny thing. I was the youngest on the expedition. The oldest was 46, Sue Giller. And 7 days into that expedition, I had like golf ball size knots in the back of my neck. And then I had tendonitis in both feet. My feet were so swollen, I had to take 2 600 milligram ibuprofens before I got out of the tent. So the swelling went down so I could pour my feet into my boots. And so here's this young whippersnapper whose ego got her to the door, who's now on the big expedition of her life. And all of a sudden, I'm like the weak link, And I'm like, this wasn't supposed to happen. It's like, well, who's deciding that?
Yeah,
is the question. And so I learned in the comfort of my glacier glasses, and nobody could see me. I cried for 3 days straight in the comfort of the Arctic and the vastness of this big white empty space, to let go of my sense of who I thought I was and who I was becoming. And my thought that strength is not, reaching the end or the top. It's your willingness to admit a weakness or that you need help. To me, that's strength.
That is. I've got goosebumps. That's some good stuff. Yeah, I'm going to go back. It's an inspiration. And then, so that is your beginning of the love of the Arctic, or a continuation? You think that's where it started, or do you think it was there all along?
No, to me, the Antarctic and the Arctic were mysterious places that were often cut off when you have a wall map. And then after I came back from the Antarctic, I'm like, hey, where are those maps that show that there's a continent down there?
You're right. And they are a mystery. Well, first of all, they're so cold. Like it's not people want to vacation there. People want a vacation where it's warm or just ski for the weekend.
That sounds really nice, by the way. I'm going to learn how to vacation warm.
Let's talk a little bit about your last vacation, quote unquote, air quotes. Well, we were all in the midst of a unplanned pause in the form of a worldwide pandemic. What were you getting up to?
Wow. I have to tell you, that was so strange. I remember the day very well. It was March 12th. We had just had a visit from the governor of Svalbard to come and check some things. And then our social media, we have a satellite telephone where we were up in the Arctic. I'll just sort of skirted around like where I was. I was closer to the North Pole than to anywhere else. I was 140 kilometers away from the nearest neighbor, totally isolated in a trapper's cabin that was built in 1930 for beluga hunting. So it's a wood cabin that had no running water, no insulation, and no electricity. Totally self-sufficient. We had solar and wind, and I was with a Norwegian woman called Hilde Follenström, who lives up in Svalbard. And we were in this trapper's cabin. I had quit my full-time job in 2018 to start Hearts in the Ice with her, because in 2016, I met her at a travel conference and we discovered that we both shared a deep, passionate love for our polar regions. And we had both been hanging around really smart scientists for decades and knew too much, that all these little independent puzzle pieces were connected. That if you're studying phytoplankton and you're studying melting glaciers, well, there's kind of a similarity and a connection between the two as it relates to climate change. So I'm not 30 anymore. That was like a big fast forward. And I honestly wanted to see if I could be part of the solution and not continue to be part of the problem. And Hilda felt the same way. So when we met and started Hearts in the Ice, it was really our way of using our passion for the polar regions, our understanding of how important they are to our global climate stream and circumpolar currents. And so we were holed up in this trapper's cabin when we heard through a satellite from our social media gal in Norway that there's a pandemic out there and Italy is on lockdown. And I'm sitting in this quiet little cabin with no TV, no outside stimulation, nothing around us except polar bears, walrus, seals, Arctic fox, lots of wildlife, like lots of bird species, and our dog Etra. And we're like, what the F? A pandemic? Like how? I had no understanding of really what was going on. So we sent emails and we asked her to send small, reduced PDF clips of news so that we could read and understand. So she sent that. And all of a sudden, we were the safest people on the planet.
If you're enjoying this conversation, you'll love the discussions happening in the New World Normal community, where we meet regularly to discuss personal growth and social issues, because we know when we do our work, we're better able to navigate this ever-changing world. Be sure to follow the link in the show notes for more information. I was going to say that social distancing, you guys took it to heart, but I can only imagine how surreal that was to be so isolated and get this kind of cryptic information coming in of like, what's going on?
Bizarre. And we worried, we like, it's so strange to say this, but this was in March and we started our project in September. So September, October, November, December, January, 7 months. I had to count there.
So you were there 7 months prior to the lockdown happening.
That's right. Yeah. And we were supposed to leave in May and get a ship to come in and pick us up, but everything was on standstill. And so when we got the news that everything was on lockdown, no shipping activity, no flights, no nothing, we were like, shit, what do we do? We can't leave because we had so much equipment. We had equipment for 9 months, a lot of heavy equipment that we were using to collect our data for. We had huge ice cores. We were taking ice core samples. We had a drone. We had all sorts of equipment that's not a big deal. Those things are not that huge, but our solar panels, our windmill, our 2 snowmobiles, our food. I mean,
yeah, I was just supposed to say, what about like your sundries and those types of supply? Was someone bringing that to you, or did you just have enough to last you a certain amount of time?
yeah, great question. The ship that came in that dropped us off had 100 people on board, like guests, family, friends, scientists, and Joss Stone came on board to play, and her brother was there and her dad, and it was a really great trip. And these people, I shouldn't say this in case anybody's listening that was on that trip, but all of the people that were on that trip helped us offload all of our equipment. It took us all morning. And then in the dead of the dark, there's 3 months of complete darkness in the Arctic. And we had total darkness. They call it the long polar night. And it's 3 months long. And we had a cargo ship come in December and crane off a pallet of supplies into our boat for a resupply of food in December. So
Okay.
it was no easy thing to get us supplies. So, when we were expecting to be picked up in May and that wasn't going to happen, we rode our snowmobiles back into town to get resupplies and go back to.
Okay.
Yeah.
No Uber Eats in the Arctic.
No Uber Eats and no like Domino's delivers, and we had to be totally self-sufficient. And our goal was to connect with youth around the world via satellite and our platform that we were using called Exploring by the City of Pants. So we had 2 calls every month via satellite. We were on satellite, and then all the schools were on video and the host was on video. And what we were trying to do was really just sort of change the narrative, because it's such a depressing topic, climate change. And if you're like most people like me, paralysis is kind of quick to set in, and you feel pretty quickly that it's too big a problem and you can't do a thing about it.
Right.
So what we wanted to do was inspire people. Both Hilda and I love the polar regions. We've both gotten our strength and our skills from the outdoors. And we both understand that the change can be kind of broken down into little stories. So through our citizen science, we were working for 9 different projects, all volunteer, mind you. Nobody paid us to do this. And we collected all this data, and then we built stories around like the phytoplankton. You can't really see them, but they are responsible for close to 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere, more than a rainforest.
So important. And I love that. I mean, how impactful that must have been for those kids in the classrooms to see you doing your work from the Arctic during that crazy time. That's one of the blessings that I've appreciated from COVID, is being that connection to people around the world. Like, I would have never thought I would connect with so many people who I say live in this little box on my computer, and I get to talk to them all the time. My friends in Great Britain, a friend in Turkey, and it's that connection. And here I'm talking to you in Canada. So it's
well, it's so strange you say that, because when we got back, we're like, okay, let's host a Zoom call with all the people who couldn't come on the pickup trip. And that was, when we finally got back, it was 19 months later. We spent a second year there. And people are like, no, I have Zoom fatigue. They're like, no, thank you. We don't want, So that was very unfamiliar to us, just to see other people.
So the citizen science, is that what it was? Citizen science?
Citizen science. Yeah.
Those were the different projects that you were working on.
So what citizen science is, and it's been around for a very long time, but it's basically people like you and me and anybody listening is a citizen, right? We're all observers. And science cannot be everywhere to collect observations and data. So citizen scientists have become really valuable policy change makers, because they add to certain data sets. Let's say a monarch butterfly is in sharp jeopardy right now and steep decline, right?
It's funny you should say that. I just got milkweed seeds. In the
really?
mail that I'm going to plant.
Hey, good for you. Good.
So I guess I'll be a citizen science.
Absolutely. It's so important. It's like, even in our backyards, and a lot of people have through COVID kind of ventured out and explored their little local areas more than ever, because they can't travel. And that's actually the most perfect pause to reignite curiosity in all of us around what's out there. Like, you don't have to travel to the Arctic or the Antarctic to figure out that we're living in a changing world. It's in your backyard. And so when we started Hearts in the Ice, we literally picked up the telephone and called people that we knew that had been doing citizen science projects on board expedition cruise ships, because these ships are operating like 100 days a year in the polar regions, and they're able to collect salt water and phytoplankton, cloud observations, happy whale, photographing whale flukes. So there are all sorts of things guests on board these ships can do, and through vetted science programs and vetted scientists. And so we just called, like, for example, Allison Cusick from Scripps Institute of Oceanography in La Jolla. Like, Allison, we're going to be stationary for 9 months at Bumsaboo. Here's our latitude and longitude in this huge fjord called the Van Kulen Fjord. Is there anything we can do to help you with the Fjord Phyto project you've got going on? And she was ecstatic, because she had never been able to collect phytoplankton in the dark, in the polar night. So we went out with our boat and our headlamps and our, pistols and flare guns, because we have polar bears and they're our neighbors. And we would go out and drag a net behind us and collect phytoplankton fur. So we did the same thing with NASA, Norwegian Polar Institute, University Center of Svalbard, and BCIT in BC. So we had 9 projects that we were working on, and it was a lot of work. But it is something that everybody can do.
I know. I keep saying inspirational, but it's empowering to see ordinary citizens, ordinary humans doing these extraordinary things that are going to help with that greater good, that end goal that we're all talking about. Like, how can we influence the climate to correct course? And you participating in that way is so inspirational. I'm going to keep saying it. Inspirational.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. We had one of our lead researchers, his name is Børge Damsgaard. He was the director at the University Center in Svalbard. And he said, because scientists are paid to do their work and they have really strict protocol to follow. And so not all citizen scientists are taken seriously, as you might imagine.
Uh-huh.
So what I feel so proud of with our project and how Hilda and I worked together and how we were very, very thorough is that we have such embrace and acknowledgement from the science community as credible citizen scientists. So Børge said the following. He said, they're following in the footsteps of other polar pioneers, but this time not hunting for furs and skins, but knowledge and wisdom. And I think, we're so proud of scientists when they shared stuff like that, because all of a sudden now we're a bridge between the science and people out there. Because if you're like me, I can't read all those abstracts. I can't read the full IPCC report, right? It's huge, too much. So we break it down. So
I like that message of making it practical, and that everybody has the opportunity to influence. You don't have to go to the Arctic. You can go to your backyard. And I know you said somewhere in our notes that it's not about the accolades. It's about inspiring youth and bringing awareness to the issue so that we can all work to make these changes. But you were just featured in, I had it up on my computer before my computer crashed.
Explorers Club 50.
Explorers 50. So it was an E something. That's something special. Yeah.
It's pretty big. It's kind of a strange thing. When I came back from the South Pole, I was pretty shy and I didn't like being in front of the camera. And I look back at how sort of you pick the things you most need to learn, I guess, without knowing it. And I had got a fast track to needing to be okay with sort of being out there in public. And I feel like anybody who has that opportunity, it behooves us as people who get to be on stage or get to share our voice or our values or our experiences, is that we use those things as a force for good. It's like, you don't go on expeditions and have adventures to satisfy yourself. They should be things in today's world that you come back with a new set of ideals or values or some knowledge that other people can benefit from knowing. And so when I get these incredible honors like the Explorers Club 50, it's my opportunity to actually grow Hearts in the Ice's platform and grow the community of people who join us and learn from us and maybe are inspired by us and maybe help support us. We're just a 2-woman show, and
2 women and a dog.
2 women and a dog. Etra has a lot to say about all this too. She's the best.
I love that you said that you were very shy and didn't like to be in front of the cameras or out there, but that putting yourself out there. And you mentioned that even before when you were just running the outdoor shop.
Yeah.
And you put yourself out there. So I feel like there's a little message in putting yourself out there. And I feel like all of our stories, that being vulnerable and sharing our stories, no matter what you perceive your story to be.
Yeah. You are in our book. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. So there's something really special about what you're saying right now. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but it is a message for people out there. And I used to be the kind of person that felt like, unless invited, I would show up. Right. And then all of a sudden, I am now bought tickets for Bettina, my sister, and myself to go to Washington to be part of the most historic day in our planet's history, where we could witness the first first female president of the United States of America, right? And then all of a sudden, it turned into the greatest march on Washington. And you and Maddie were there.
Yes, we were. We were going to see Bernie, so we might not be going to see the same people.
It's okay. Yeah, it's like, I think the important message there for me is that you showed up, and you inspire me because you have always been very out there with what you believe and what you care about. And so I'm going to put the mirror right back on you, because I think it's so important for people to understand that showing up is just, if your community is wanting to embrace something that you think is good for the community, why don't you show up and be an advocate for that? Lend your voice and physically be present. And that march on Washington was probably the first big thing where I showed up. Hilda flew down from Norway for it. I had the Canadian flag wrapped around my back. She had the Norwegian flag on her back. And people were like, "Oh my God, you came all the way." And we're like, "Of course, this is about all of us."
Yeah, that was an amazing day. And there were so many people in that crowd that I wanted to connect with, but how ridiculously impossible was it to find anybody in that sea of humanity?
Impossible.
And like you said, I was there with my daughter and she was 18 at the time. And, I'm being protective mom, it's going to be a big crowd. We should stay on the edge just in case something happens. Cause we had been at the inauguration the day before. So we heard all the commotion, and because we were there with the school trip. So we were there for the inauguration. I just got her signed out for the next day. So we played hooky from the school event so we can go to the Women's March. But I'm telling her, let's stay on the edge. And then next thing you know, we're like, whoop, sweeped right in. We're up in a tree watching.
Oh my.
Yeah. I'm like, well, this is safer, I guess, in case there's any kind of stampede. We're up above.
Yeah. It's just the showing up piece, is we all need to show up. And I don't know, maybe it was JFK who said, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
And I think it's not just like, if you feel, you're not there where you can't lend your voice to whatever the situation is. Bearing witness is huge too. And being able to share a firsthand experience. And that's part of it, of the New World Normal community, as we talk about these things. We're getting a little off topic, but the importance of the community and us all having a voice and working together through these tough times, that it takes some of that introspective, doing our own work on our own proverbial shit, so that we're better prepared to navigate all this craziness that is happening around us.
That's right.
And doing so in the collective, like we are learning and growing together, so that it then ripples out into the rest of the world. In theory.
Very well said. I'm reading, because I'm still evolving and growing. And I think curiosity is a key ingredient to navigating change, internal and external. And I'm reading a couple of different books. That always happens. But one of them is by Karen O'Brien, and it's called You Matter More Than You Think. And it is a beautiful book. It's on quantum social change for a thriving world. And she's part of an organization she created in Oslo, Norway, called Sea Change, like sea, letter C, and then change. And it's on how we transform societies to change behaviors and ways of thinking, ways of adapting, right? We're a very resilient species, but actually, how do we adapt? I mean, that is the big question mark out there. When I was at Bumsaboo for 19 months without anything around me to distract me, my adaptation was like on the fast track. But we're living in a world full of distractions. So how do we, with all our comforts, understand the people who are living in a world of constant discomfort, right? So it's like we need to resensitize who we are as human beings to thinking about. I'm going to go back to this expedition behavior. We need to think of ourselves as a global entity, and that we are all connected, even though we're far apart. We share different cultural values. We are either men, women, or children, or species, and wildlife. But it's really thinking that it does involve a sort of a deep dive on a rather spiritual level to understand that what's happening now requires a deep cultural shift that starts with the person, and the person willing to actually change how they view the world and how they view people.
That is huge. We are on a global expedition. We're not getting through this singularity. Like, individualism isn't going to get us to the end goal. Like, we all need to work together. We are a global community.
Absolutely. I think more and more people are sort of disconnected from our natural world. And I think that's where we find that connectivity I'm talking about. It happens when you find your little sit spot, or you find a place where you're just quiet, just shut off, go and if you meditate or whatever it is, just go out. I mean, that's my church, is the outdoors, and find a place to actually just let some original thought emerge. I mean, I had original thought at Bumsaboo for 19 months. Imagine that, where I tapped into a deep well of creativity in that silence that I had never experienced ever before in my life. It was amazing.
What a blessing to get that time to say. And then I feel like a little bit of the pandemic time was that for a lot of people, that forced pause that was uncomfortable, but that's sometimes being uncomfortable is where we need to go to make those new revelations. And the other thing I noticed in my community is, like, I hike a lot around here, and you didn't usually see that many people, usually visitors from out of town. But during the pandemic, it was so cool to see families, out on the trails that didn't normally have that time together. So to connect, I'm trying to tie this back to you don't have to go to the Arctic, go to your own backyard, find some place in nature, sit and take some time to appreciate it and connect with yourself and figure out where you can play a part in the solution. It doesn't have to be a big way. I read a meme recently. We're not looking for a few people to be, zero waste, eco-friendly. We're looking for millions of people to do better.
Yeah.
Just make better choices every day.
That's right. I mean, we need everybody to be a climate hero, and I know that sounds like somebody beating their chest, but
I'm like, do I get a cape?
You get a cape. We all need to,
as long as it's recycled. As long as it's recycled.
That's right, eh? Oh my! And it's funny. I am like the world's most imperfect person, but at least I admit it, and I'm continually learning too. I don't have all the answers. Certainly not making all the right choices, but I'm aware, and I'm absolutely trying.
I'm a huge fan of the phrase progress over perfection.
Yeah, there you go.
So as long as I'm doing better every day,
that's it.
Better than I was yesterday, then I'm doing all right.
Yep. And then there's a whole aspect that I think we struggled with a little bit at Bumsaboo, or at least Bumsaboo is the name of the trapper's cabin, by the way.
It's such a fun little name.
I know. I love to say it. It's just sounds fun, and it means Little Bear Hut.
Aww.
Although the biggest bear was 650 kilos that showed up at our front door one day.
Oh, hello.
It was a big guy. Is this notion of mental health in our silence and in our lack of connectivity with other people? There's been a lot of despair and suicide, and especially in the Arctic communities. And you're just talking about how your community, a lot of people were out hiking where they weren't hiking before. At least maybe you didn't see as many people out there enjoying the trails on the island. And how important it is to actually maybe once a day reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a while. Connect with people, because we're living in a world that, even though we're connected, we're more disconnected than ever before. Because we don't have a need to actually farm and have purpose that is actually involving our physical body and our minds in a way that our grandparents used to do. So it's like we need to really engage with our community, with our family, with our, I mean, if you want to, if you close with your family,
your chosen family, whichever works for you.
That's right. Or
bonus
even
family.
Their bonus family. We have quite a few bonus families, and even connecting with organizations. Like, I'd love for people to sign up on our newsletter and just join our school calls. They're all free. It's just, step out of your comfort zone, because the second we stay comfortable all the time, we're not progressing, eh?
Yeah, we're not progressing.
Yeah.
We're not growing, and we're not connecting. And I feel like a lot of your message is finding that purpose, but your purpose could be just a matter of connecting with your other humans.
That's it.
And not just on social media. Like, we are connected, but that's kind of given us a false sense of connection. Like, we know what everyone's up to, like, are enough people. Maybe I should connect with somebody that I don't see on social media. Or even if I just liking their posts and they're liking my posts, is that really connecting? You know,
like holding space for somebody, literally.
It's good stuff.
The big gift. Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're coming to the end of our time. And, I am remembering to ask my question. I originally started New World Normal. It was about normalizing things. What do we want to see be normal? And then I spoke to somebody who's an anthropologist in Australia, talk about connecting with people around the world.
Boy. Yeah.
And he has a show called Idioms of Normality. So he talks about normal, and realizing that normal in itself is kind of exclusive and inclusive. You're either normal or you're not normal. So we've now decided that New World Normal, we are disrupting normal.
Yeah. So we all need to be disruptors.
Right. So if you had a magic wand and were able to disrupt something that's normal in our current day cultures, world, society, what would you use your magic wand to disrupt?
Oh boy. I think I would want to disrupt the leadership, and I don't know how to find the right words for this, but the leadership paradigm that's out there, which is all about top-down leadership. One person either trying to affect change by dictating what's going to happen, or, there's so much in our world that has gone wrong because of one person. And so I would like to disrupt that paradigm and force quit, because that is an app on the computer, force quit that. And then I would like to reboot and see leadership across all arms, where it is more of the war of the swarms, and that the individuals and the underserved and underrepresented populations have greater seats at the decision-making table, where they're more diverse, they're more inclusive, and that there are far more females represented there, because, that's just, it's still, if we look at all the metrics out there, there are too few women leaders, and the ones that are leading are badasses, and they're leading with a heart. And they're leading with a care and a great sense of compassion for others in the community. And that is not the typical male paradigm of leadership out there. So, I call myself a CEO, and I've reframed that to mean climate engagement officer.
I like it.
Which to me is leadership across all arms. So I would want to sort of force all of the senior executives out there to really embrace the fact that diversity and inclusion at the decision-making table, it's important today, because we are a very diverse global population of people. And I know, I don't mean just women at the table. We need minority groups and all sorts of voices.
I agree. I love that power of the people and the power of the collective and grassroots movements. It's all good stuff. And I love
you and me, baby.
Yep. And I don't know if you saw the news, was it yesterday or the day before, that the warehouse in Staten Island, an Amazon warehouse, two everyday workers, one of them had been wrongfully fired from the warehouse during the pandemic, got together and unionized that warehouse.
Wow. I didn't read that. That's fantastic.
Right. I mean, that is a huge David and Goliath story. Like, they took on Amazon and were able to, because I know they were having issues in other Amazon warehouses where they were trying to unionize, but the corporate hijinks and
that's huge.
It's so huge. And to hear the two guys that were able to do it. And I feel like the reason they were successful is because they were on the inside. It was an inside job. Their coworkers trusted and knew that they knew what was going on. And so the corporate lobby, the corporate representatives couldn't twist the story. So it is empowering to see that those stories of grassroots movements.
Yeah, putting the power back in the hands of the people, which is a lot of what this DAO in the blockchain world is trying to do, to remove, the power from the big platforms like Facebook and put it in the hands of the people. So maybe that's the new world normal.
Yeah, it's a hopeful thought to, like, if we all can get on the same track, get that expedition behavior.
Yeah. I mean, we're proof. Hearts in the Ice is proof. It's like one person times two, and look at all the bold changes and moves, and because it's not about us. We're just the instigators. We're just the weavers of the various networks of people to mobilize change. And every single person out there has that power. If they just find a quiet spot, source it, use it, show up, and share it.
That is an excellent spot to end. Thank you so much, Sunniva, for coming on and sharing your story and your insights and your wisdom and your inspiration.
Thank you. What a pleasure to be with you, Deb. Thank you.
Every conversation I have for this podcast, I think it's my favorite. And this one is no different. And I'm so inspired by all these guests. And Sunniva is no different, as you heard me say several times in the conversation. So inspired. I hope you are too. I hope you're inspired to get out into nature, get in touch with nature, get in touch with yourself. And remember, we're not looking for perfection when it comes to taking care of the environment, but just try and do better. Look for small tweaks you can make in your day-to-day life that might benefit the world around you. And be sure to go check out what Sunniva and her partner are up to with their project Hearts in Ice. All that information is in the show notes, and I hope to see you back in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. If you enjoyed what you heard, feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. If you didn't enjoy what you heard, reach out to us and let us know how we can make it better. This show really is about all of us, not just me and my guests, but how we can all work together to make the world just a little bit better. And if you'd like to connect with us in other ways, be sure to follow us on Instagram. We also have a free Facebook group where our fans of the show can connect and discuss their favorite episodes. And in addition to that, we have a membership platform, The Collective by New World Normal, where you will participate in monthly workshops, pop-up challenges, and weekly meetings to support a more intentional lifestyle. We have meaningful conversations about important topics, all in a space that is safe, supportive, and encouraging. So join us. And if you'd like to show us some more support, check out our intentional apparel shop online, New World Intentions. You'll find t-shirts, hats, totes, all with positive messaging to help you move more mindfully through your day and help you to create that new world normal. You can also check out our affiliate page, where you'll find our favorite eco-friendly household and personal care products. Thanks again for listening.